In all my years, I've learned that the most difficult truth for a person to accept is the one they've built their entire identity around hiding. People will fight you tooth and nail, they'll call you names, they'll storm off a stage, they'll do anything to protect a lie they've told themselves is the truth. But every now and then, you see a flicker in someone's eyes, a crack in the armor. That's the moment you live for. That's the moment change becomes possible. I remember the day Sarah first came to my attention. The initial email from her was a novel, a detailed prosecution of her younger sister, Emily. On paper, it was a classic case. Sarah, the older sister, was the responsible one. She had a stable career, a mortgage, a solid life she had built brick by methodical brick. Emily, on the other hand, was portrayed as a whirlwind of chaos, flitting from job to job, relationship to relationship, always one crisis away from needing a bailout. Sarah's plea was straightforward. Dr. Phil, you have to help me fix my sister. She's destroying her life and she's dragging our family down with her. The world is full of these dynamics. The caretaker and the chaos magnet, the saint and the sinner. It's a story as old as time, and people get very comfortable in their roles. When Sarah and Emily arrived for the pre-interview, the roles they had practiced for a lifetime were on full display. Sarah was polished, articulate, her binder of evidence, printouts of text messages, bank statements showing loans she'd given Emily was thick and organized. She spoke with the weary authority of a long-suffering parent, not a sister. Her narrative was compelling. She loved her sister, she insisted, but she was at her wit's end. This was tough love. This was an intervention. Emily, by contrast, was a closed book. She sat slumped in her chair, arms crossed, offering one-word answers. She looked exhausted, defeated. To anyone on the surface, she was the picture of the problem child Sarah had described. She fit the label perfectly, unmotivated, ungrateful, a lost cause. My producers saw a clear-cut story, the hero sister trying to save the lost one. But I've sat across from too many people to take a story at face value. When a narrative is that clean, that black and white, my alarm bells start ringing. Because life isn't clean. People aren't just good or bad. They are a collection of needs, fears, and payoffs. I watched Sarah as she talked. She wasn't just frustrated, she was energized. There was a current of righteous indignation running through her that was more than just concern, it was her fuel. She described Emily's latest failure, getting fired from a job Sarah had helped her get with a level of detail that was almost obsessive. She recounted the phone calls, the excuses, the disappointment. But as she spoke, I wasn't watching Emily for a reaction. I was watching Sarah. Her posture straightened. Her voice became stronger. In recounting her sister's weakness, she was reinforcing her own strength. Her identity as the capable, stable, good sister was being polished to a high shine with every story of Emily's dysfunction. And that right there is where the real story begins. It's never just about the person in the hot seat. It's about the whole system. The problem isn't a person, it's a pattern. And Sarah wasn't just a participant in this pattern, she was its primary architect, she just didn't know it yet. To understand the present, you always have to dig into the past. Always. Behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. The binder Sarah brought in, the one she presented like a prosecutor laying out a case for the death penalty, wasn't just a collection of grievances, it was a history book. It was the story of two little girls trying to survive in a family where love and attention were scarce commodities you had to compete for. When I sat down with them separately, I asked about their childhood. Sarah's narrative was, again, polished. She remembered being the little mother. Their own mother was often ill, and their father worked 2 jobs, coming home exhausted and irritable. So Sarah stepped up. She made sure Emily did her homework, that she was dressed for school, that dinner was started. She was praised for it. You're such a good girl, Sarah. So responsible. What would we do without you? Those words were water in the desert for a little kid. They became her identity, her value, her currency for earning love. Emily's story was the faded, blurry photograph of the same scene. She remembered her sister not as a helper, but as a boss. She never let me do anything myself, Emily told me, her voice barely a whisper. If I was trying to tie my shoes, she'd push my hands away and just do it. If I was struggling with a math problem, she'd sigh, grab the pencil, and just write down the answer. What Sarah saw as helping Emily experienced as a constant message, you're not good enough. You can't do it. You need me. Over time, a child internalizes that. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why try when you've already been told you're going to fail? Why learn to tie your own shoes when someone is always there to do it for you faster and better? This is what we call a co-created drama. Sarah needed to be the rescuer because it made her feel valuable and in control. Emily, in turn, learned to be the victim because it was the only role left for her to play, the only way she could get a sliver of the attention her perfect older sister wasn't already monopolizing. It's a toxic, symbiotic dance they had been perfecting for 20 plus years. Sarah's help wasn't a gift, it was a transaction. She would provide the solution, and in return, Emily would provide the failure that proved Sarah was necessary. The escalation that brought them to my stage was predictable. It's what happens when the pattern gets pushed to its absolute limit. Emily, in her late 20s, was still living a life that looked like a teenager's. She'd been in a relationship with a man Sarah openly despised, a musician with no steady income, who Sarah labeled a parasite. Sarah had been giving Emily money for rent, for groceries, for car payments, all while delivering lectures on responsibility. The help always came with a thick coating of shame and judgment. Then came the final straw. Sarah had co-signed on a small apartment for Emily, a last chance to get her life together. 3 months in, Emily and her boyfriend broke up, she lost her job in the emotional fallout, and she couldn't make rent. The eviction notice went to Sarah. For Sarah, this wasn't just a financial hit, it was a profound personal betrayal. It was the ultimate validation of her narrative. See, I give her everything, and she throws it all away. She is hopeless. The phone calls she described were brutal. Sarah wasn't just angry, she was vicious. She attacked Emily's character, her choices, her very worth as a person. Emily, according to Sarah, just took it. She cried, she apologized, she made promises she couldn't keep. But what I was hearing was something else. Emily's passivity, her retreat into a puddle of tears, was a weapon of its own. It was a passive-aggressive way of confirming Sarah's role. By collapsing, she forced Sarah to stay in the strong one position. It was her way of saying, "You're right, I'm a mess." Now, what are you going to do about it? It was a checkmate. Sarah couldn't abandon her, because abandoning the victim would mean abandoning her own identity as a savior. She was trapped in the very role she had created for herself. That's when she wrote to me. She wasn't looking for a solution. She was looking for a bigger stage and a louder microphone to proclaim her righteousness and her sister's failure. She thought I would be her ultimate ally, the final authoritative voice that would declare her the winner in this lifelong war. She had no idea I was about to ask her to look in the mirror. The air backstage on taping day has a unique electricity. It's a mix of nervous anticipation and raw, exposed emotion. For some guests, it's terrifying. For others, it's a stage they've been rehearsing for their whole lives. Sarah was in her element. She had her binder, her talking points memorized. She looked like a lawyer about to give her opening statement in a case she was absolutely certain she would win. She exuded a kind of brittle confidence, a self-righteousness that was both her shield and her sword. Emily, on the other hand, looked like she was about to walk to her own execution. She was pale, drawn, and she couldn't stop fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone, least of all her sister. My producers tried to talk to her, to offer her water, to make her feel comfortable, but she had retreated so far into herself that she was barely there. She was a ghost haunting the edges of her sister's drama. This physical dynamic was a perfect visual representation of their entire relationship. Sarah taking up all the space, all the oxygen in the room, and Emily shrinking herself down to nothing to accommodate it. People think my job is to get on stage and fix the problem person. They see Emily slumped and defeated and assume my focus will be on her. What are you going to do to get your life together? Why do you keep making these bad choices? And I'll ask those questions, of course, but they're not the main event. My real target wasn't sitting in that chair. My real target was the invisible, powerful force that had been running this family for decades. The unspoken agreement, the dance they both engaged in, my job was to turn the floodlights on the pattern itself. And to do that, I had to go through Sarah. I had to dismantle the identity she had so carefully constructed as the martyr, the saint, the long-suffering hero. When we walked out from behind those panels and the applause died down, the dynamic intensified. Sarah sat up straight, facing me, ready for battle. Emily seemed to sink even further into her chair, as if hoping the upholstery would swallow her whole. I started by giving Sarah the floor. This is a crucial step. You have to let people tell their story in their own words. You have to let them build their case, because in doing so, they reveal everything, not just the facts as they see them, but the emotional payoffs, the self-serving biases, the cracks in their own logic. She opened her binder with a flourish. Dr. Phil, I've tried to be patient, but I don't know what else to do. On May 12th, I had to pay her phone bill or it would have been shut off. On June 3rd, she called me crying because she'd spent her grocery money on concert tickets, so I had to send her $100. This is a printout of the eviction notice that came to my house for her apartment. She went on and on, page after page, a meticulous accounting of every failure, every bailout, every disappointment. I let her go. I watched the audience. They were nodding. A woman in the front row had her arms crossed, looking at Emily with pure disdain. A man a few rows back was shaking his head in sympathy for Sarah. They were buying it, hook, line, and sinker, because it's an easy story to buy. We all know someone like Emily, or we think we do. We all want to believe that if we just work hard and do the right thing, like Sarah, our lives will be in order. Sarah was validating a worldview that makes people feel safe. She finally paused, taking a breath, looking at me for confirmation. She expected me to turn to Emily and say, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" But I didn't. I stayed focused on her. I looked at her, then down at the thick binder on her lap, a monument to her sister's failures. I reached over and gently, with one finger, I closed it. The sound was soft, but in the quiet of the studio, it felt like a gavel. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by the gesture. "I hear your frustration, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and even. "I see the evidence. I have no doubt that every single thing you've said in here is factually true. Emily has made a lot of mistakes. She has been irresponsible. She has cost you time, and she has cost you a lot of money. I get it, but I want to ask you a question. And it's not about her, it's about you. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle in the air between us. What do you get out of this? That one question hung in the air. What do you get out of this? It was so simple, yet it completely short-circuited the narrative she had prepared. Sarah blinked. She looked confused, as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Her entire case, her binder, her righteous anger, it was all built on the premise that she was the giver, the selfless one, the one who got nothing but grief in return. What do I get out of it? She repeated, her voice laced with disbelief and a hint of outrage. I get stress. I get debt. I get sleepless nights worrying about her. I get nothing. That's the whole point, Dr. Phil. I do everything and I get nothing. The audience murmured in agreement. She was playing to them and they were with her. I don't believe you, I said flatly. Not aggressively, just as a statement of fact. I don't believe we do anything in this life for nothing. We don't repeat behaviors over and over again unless there is a payoff. It might not be a good one, it might be a dysfunctional one, but there's always a payoff. So I'm going to ask you again. When you swoop in and rescue your sister, when you pay her bill at the last second, when you get to be the one who points out her every mistake and then fixes it for her, what do you get? How does it make you feel? This is the moment of confrontation. It's not about yelling or pointing fingers. It's about holding up a mirror so clean and so clear that the person can no longer avoid seeing their own reflection. You could see the gears turning in her head. She was searching her arsenal of rehearsed answers, but none of them fit the question. I guess it makes me feel responsible, she stammered. Okay, responsible. What does that mean to you, being responsible? Does that make you feel good? It doesn't make me feel good, she insisted, her frustration mounting. It makes me feel like an adult. It's what you're supposed to do for family. Is it? I pushed back gently. Is it your job as her sister to manage her finances, to co-sign her leases, to be her safety net for every poor decision she makes? Or is that the job of a parent? And let's be honest, you've been parenting her since you were kids, haven't you? You took on the role of little mother because your own mother couldn't. And you got a lot of praise for it. You were the good girl, being responsible, being the fixer, being the hero. That became your identity, didn't it? For the first time since she walked on stage, a crack appeared in her armor. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes darted over to Emily, who was watching this exchange with a stunned expression as if she had never considered this possibility either. And let's talk about Emily's role in all this. I continued turning the mirror slightly. Every time you cast yourself as the hero, what role does that leave for her? Sarah was silent. It leaves the role of the damsel in distress, doesn't it? The victim, the failure. You can't be the hero unless there's someone to save. You can't be the competent one unless there's someone who is incompetent. You two have been co-writing this script for 25 years. You get to feel superior, righteous, and in control. And what does she get? She gets to avoid ever having to truly grow up. She never has to face the real consequences of her actions because she knows deep down that you will never, ever let her hit rock bottom. Her failure is your fuel, Sarah. You need her to be a mess because her chaos makes you feel sane. Her weakness makes you feel strong. The words landed in the silent studio with a deafening thud. Sarah's face, which had been a mask of righteous anger, began to crumble. Her lower lip trembled. The binder lay forgotten in her lap. The audience was completely still. They had come expecting to see a simple problem child get a talking to, and instead, they were witnessing the deconstruction of a family's entire operating system. I turned to Emily. Her head was up now. She was crying. But these weren't the manipulative tears Sarah had described. These were silent tears of recognition. "Emily," I said softly, "is any of this true? Do you feel like your sister has ever truly believed you could succeed on your own?" She shook her head, unable to speak, and let out a small, choked sob. "Because every time she rescued you," I continued, looking back at Sarah, "she was also sending you a very powerful message. You can't do it without me. You are not capable." You weren't just giving her money, Sarah. You were robbing her of her own self-efficacy. You were loving her to death. That was it. That was the breakthrough. The phrase "loving her to death" seemed to pierce through all of Sarah's defenses. The tough, articulate, in-control woman who had walked onto my stage dissolved. Her shoulders slumped, and she put her face in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. It wasn't about the money or the eviction or the concert tickets. It was about two little girls, one who learned that her worth came from being needed, and another who learned that her role was to need. And they had been stuck in that lonely, desperate play ever since. The fight was over. The real work was about to begin. The raw emotion that erupts after a breakthrough is a delicate thing. It's like a wound that's been lanced. It's painful and messy, but it's also the first step toward healing. My job in that moment is to hold the space, not to rush in with solutions or platitudes, but to let the truth settle. Sarah's sobs weren't theatrical. They were the guttural, painful sound of a deeply held belief system shattering. She was mourning the loss of her identity. If she wasn't the hero, the rescuer, the saint, then who was she? It's a terrifying question. Emily, for her part, was also crying, but her posture had changed. For the first time all day, she sat up straight. She looked at her weeping sister not with triumph, but with a dawning, heartbreaking empathy. She was seeing Sarah not as her warden or her critic, but as a person who was also trapped, also in pain. The wall between them, built brick by brick with every rescue and every failure, was dissolving. I let them sit with it for a moment before I spoke. "This is not about blame," I said, directing my words to both of them. "There is no villain here. They're just two people who learned how to survive using the tools they had as children. You, Sarah, learned that your value came from being the caretaker. You, Emily, learned that your path to getting attention, even negative attention, was by being the one who needed care. You created a perfect, dysfunctional loop. The problem is, you're not children anymore. That system, which may have served you in some way back then, is now destroying any chance you have at a real adult peer-to-peer relationship." I looked at Sarah, who was slowly composing herself, wiping her eyes. "Your binder," I said, gesturing to the stack of papers on her lap, "is a monument to your resentment. You've been keeping a scorecard. Every time you helped Emily, you weren't given freely. You were making a deposit in a resentment bank, and then you were angry when she couldn't pay you back with the currency you wanted, which was perfect behavior. That's not help, Sarah. That's a contract with fine print she could never read, because she never even knew she was signing it." "So what am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice thick and raw. "Just let her end up on the street? Let her fail completely?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Maybe the most loving thing you can do for your sister right now is to get out of her way. Let her feel the full weight of her own choices. Let her be late on a bill and have to call the company herself to work out a payment plan. Let her get evicted and have to figure out where to live. Let her succeed or let her fail, but let it be hers. You have to be willing to sit on your hands, bite your tongue, and let her live her own life, messes and all. Your help has become a handicap. It's time to take off the training wheels. She might fall, she probably will, but she will also learn for the first time how to get back up on her own. This is the hardest part for the rescuer. The idea of letting go is terrifying because their sense of control is tied to the other person's dependency. It feels like abandonment. It feels cruel. And for you, Emily, I said, turning to her, your free ride is over. The Bank of Sarah is officially closed. That might sound scary, but it should also sound like freedom. Your sister's help has come at a very high price. Your self-respect. You have been trading your autonomy for a safety net. It's time for you to stop playing the victim. It's time to fire your sister from the job of being your mother. You are a grown woman. It's time to start acting like it. It will be hard. You will have to learn skills you've never been allowed to develop. But the payoff is that you will finally get to own your life. Your successes will be your own, and your failures will be your own, and that's what being an adult is all about. We spent the rest of the show mapping out a plan. This isn't just about a dramatic moment on television. It's about providing real tools for change. For Sarah, the first step was therapy for herself. She needed to explore where this deep-seated need to control and rescue came from. She had to find a new source of self-worth that wasn't tied to her sister's dysfunction. We talked about setting hard boundaries. No more money, no more co-signing, no more unsolicited advice. Her new role was simply to be a sister. She could offer love and encouragement, but she could no longer offer solutions. For Emily, the path was more practical. We set her up with a vocational coach to help her identify her own skills and interests, not just take whatever job Sarah found for her. We connected her with a financial literacy program to learn how to budget, how to manage her own money for the first time in her life. The goal was to build her competence, one small step at a time, so she could begin to build a foundation of self-trust. When the show ended, they walked off the stage together. They weren't holding hands or having some big, tearful movie moment. It was quieter than that. More real, there was a space between them, a new, respectful distance. They were two separate people, not two halves of a dysfunctional whole. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. Patterns that deep don't disappear overnight. The urge for Sarah to swoop in and for Emily to collapse would be immense. Change is a choice you have to make every single day. But for the first time in their lives, they had a new script. They had a map that led to a different destination. Whether they chose to follow it was up to them. My work was done. The truth was out, sitting there in the open. And you can't put a truth that powerful back in the box.